Showtime. Here we are, Two Doctors Homestead. My name's Daniel.
And I'm Janet.
And this is the Dystopian Book Club. We're talking about Iron Heel. We decided to start a few minutes early because we're just kind of sitting here waiting for the clock to tick. So we figured might as well. Why not? Why not start a little early? I'm not sure if Jay's going to make it, but hopefully she does. We enjoy having her with us on the lives. But here we are. So this is part 4.
Yes.
So we've been talking about Iron Heel for over 3 hours now at this point.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We're ready to be done with the book, and we're actually probably going to take a break from lives after this book. Maybe not after tonight.
It's summer.
It's summertime. We could be in the pool drinking margaritas.
I could be, yeah.
We could be floating in the pool. It's beautiful outside, floating in the pool, drinking margaritas, but here we are talking about Iron Heel. Jack London, Socialist Revolution in America.
Yes, we are.
But we'll keep going. We will persevere, push forward, keep talking about Iron Heel. So we're only on chapter 3. I think there's like 20 chapters.
Yeah, there's like 20, 25 chapters.
Yeah, there's like 20.
It's been a while since
I've read a lot of books since then. But here we are, chapter 3, Jackson's Arm, Iron Heel. Written in, I'll say 1908, I think, if memory serves. I don't know if I want to go that far back in my notes.
1908. Yes.
Yeah, written in 1908 by Jack London.
And we remember because that was my grandpa's birth year.
Grandpa's birth year.
So you're correct.
Born in that time. Not going to go too deep into the background. Watch any of the other 3 videos.
Yeah, there's 3 hours there that people can
There's 3 hours.
catch up if they want to.
Right, if you want to catch up, if you want to learn about Jack London, if you want to learn about socialism, capitalism,
According
all the
to
other
Jack London.
Right, all the other isms. We covered that in the first couple hours. Now we're jumping into the book here. So we were only on chapter 2. That was where Ernest and the bishop had their talk.
Oh, okay.
Right. We finished their talk, and that's something we've been doing. Is there's a few important conversations in the book that I think was really Jack London trying to give his explain his socialist ideals.
Yeah.
Right. Trying
to
sell.
He was on his deathbed soapbox.
Right. His deathbed soapbox.
His last.
And we're reading the conversations as they are, and maybe that's why it's taken so long to get through it. But I think it's important.
Okay.
Right, important for him.
You got to do your live the way you want to do
it.
We're
doing it the way we're going to do it.
Yep.
So, chapter 3. Some of these are pretty short. There wasn't really a lot there to grab. Not a lot of build up necessarily. So, chapter 3, we had Jackson's arm. So, as the Ernest was on a soapbox, there was someone walking by down the street that was missing an arm, and he was sort of a beggar now.
Oh,
right. Yeah. And that's where he's like, hey, that guy worked for your dad or worked for the Sierra Mill and lost his arm, and he didn't get workers' comp, and he didn't get anything like that. They just threw him out on the street.
Yeah, because they didn't have workers' comp then.
Right. And Avis, I think it's Avis, right? Yeah, Avis. She doesn't believe that. She doesn't believe that they would do that they would just sort of kick him out on the street like that.
Well, I mean, the dude sued him.
Yeah, he sued.
And
tried to get the workers' comp. Right. He lost his arm in the mill, and he lost and basically got nothing, and now he's a beggar in the street.
Yeah.
He went from a productive employee.
Yeah.
No, right now he's a beggar. So chapter 3, Jackson's arm, she goes to investigate. So Avis Earhart investigates Jackson's firing from the Sierra Mill. She speaks first with Jackson, who tells Avis that the accident happened because he was tired. It did not happen because he was negligent. Avis then speaks with Jackson's lawyer, Joseph Hurd, who says he could not get anything useful out of the witnesses to help Jackson. The man tells Avis his opponent and the judge are pretty friendly. Then Avis speaks with a foreman named Peter Donnelly, who testified. He confesses that the lawyer for Sierra Mill, Colonel Ingram, coached him on what to say in his testimony.
I mean, that's how things are now. So.
Right. Yeah, that was sort of...
Wouldn't be any different.
Yeah, that was sort of the realization that the system isn't fair. Right. I think that she was idealistic and young and thought somehow the system was fair and realized it wasn't. Right. He got hurt and they just tossed him out.
Yep.
Right. Not fair. Realize life's not fair. So chapter 4, Slaves of the Machine. So she did her investigation and she was super frustrated. So she writes an article. She's trying to get exposure, right? You can't relitigate, but she wants to draw attention, somehow right the wrong, right? So she writes an article about Jackson's case. She tries to get every newspaper in town to publish it, but all of them reject her writing. She asked her friend Piercy Layton, who is a news reporter at one of the papers, why article is not published. He replies that it is editorial policy. The reporters have nothing to do with publishing decisions. He explains, we are all solid with the corporations, which is sort of funny because this is 1908.
Oh, they knew what side their bread was buttered on.
So in 1908,
why wouldn't they?
yeah,
in
1908, basically they're saying is, yeah, he was sort of railroaded through the courts.
Yes.
Tossed out on the street, and the newspapers don't want to have anything to do with it. So even in 1908, the newspapers were sold out. Right. They were newspapers have been sold out since
people have been sold out
since 1908. Newspapers sold out. Not a new concept. All right. So that was chapter 3 and 4. Chapter 5 is the Philomaths. I believe it's pronounced Philomath. So Avis begins to realize that Jackson's civil case had merit, but Jackson lost because the system was deliberately stacked against him. She goes back to Ernest Everhart and she tells him her findings. So he sent her out into the world to go do your own investigation. Don't believe me. And she did. And she's like, well, this sucks. Right.
Yeah. She was living a very coddled life.
Right. Very coddled life.
So this is her,
Yeah. Yeah, both the courts and the journalists and the newspapers, they're all sided with the money. It's basically everyone's paid off.
Yeah.
Ernest visits the Cunningham home frequently after his first dinner with them. Avis suspects that he likes her and finds out she's correct. Before long, he is courting her and comes on strong. They make plans to marry. Ernest and Avis are invited to another dinner with the upper class at a place called the Philomath Club. They know the event is designed to humiliate Ernest. Instead, Ernest again attacks the upper class in his speech. He threatens the upper class by stating, "This is the revolution, my masters. Stop it if you can." The members of the Philomath Club react just as hostily, and a long argument about capitalism versus socialism ensures. And I think this is the first time Jack London really soapboxes on capitalism versus socialism.
Oh, okay.
I think the first argument at the dinner party was sort of establish Ernest as this great debater, but it was more against metaphysicians and the system than it was necessarily about socialism versus capitalism. Similar to the argument with the bishop, which is more about, hey, the church is blind to the plight, right, of the average man. They're preaching, but they're not really
staying out of it.
Right, they're staying out of it.
They're using rich people's money.
Right. This is really, I think, the first and maybe the major sort of dialogue for Jack London really gets into it, the socialism, capitalism side. And I looked up Philomath. It's a lover of learning, a scholar, especially a student of mathematics. So the Philomath Club was basically lovers of learning.
Oh, okay.
And in 1908, at the time, people didn't have TV and they didn't have the internet. They didn't have all that stuff.
Yeah, you had to do something.
So people would get together for dinner parties.
Exactly.
Right.
When people's heads weren't in their phones on the internet.
In your phones. Yeah, you weren't on the internet. You weren't in your phones. You weren't on all that stuff. You'd go to a dinner party.
Right.
Right. And they bring in speakers. Yeah, they bring in speakers. And in this case, for entertainment, for the night's entertainment, they bring in a speaker.
Yeah.
And in this case, the speaker was Ernest.
Yeah.
Right. And
they didn't know what they had coming.
Right. They didn't know what they had coming. Right. Of course, being Jack London, I'm not going to give anything away. Ernest clearly wins the debate. Always wins the debate. So here we'll get into it. It was at the Philomath Club, a wonderful night of battle, wherein Ernest bearded the masters in their lair. Now, the Philomath Club was the most select on the Pacific coast. It was the creation of Miss Brentwood, an enormously wealthy old maid, and it was her husband and family, the toy. Husband and family, the toy. And toy. I don't know. Its members were the wealthiest in the community and the strongest.
He's the toy.
Right. The strongest minded of the wealthy, with, of course, a sprinkling of scholars to give it intellectual tone. The Philomath had no clubhouse. It was not that kind of club. Once a month, its members gathered at some of their private houses to listen to a lecture. The lectures were usually, though not always, hired. If a chemist in New York made a discovery in, say, radium, all his expenses across the continent were paid, and as well as he received a princely fee for his time. The same with a returning explorer from the polar regions, or the latest literary or artistic successes. No visitors were allowed, while it was a Philomath's policy to prevent none of its discussions to get in the papers. Thus, great statesmen, and there had been such occasions, we are able fully to speak their minds. So, I mean, it was very exclusive. Once again, they didn't have the internet.
Sounds like
They
fun.
didn't have TV.
Yeah.
So if pull them in, hey, come tell us your story.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Tell us the story.
Yeah.
Some great scientist, hey, come tell us your story. So very exclusive way to get information.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was life before TV.
Yeah.
So we'll scoot forward later in the evening. So Ernest arose and began to speak. He began in a low voice, haltingly and modestly, and with an air of evident embarrassment. He spoke of his birth in the working class and of the sordidness and wretchedness of his environment, where flesh and spirit were alike starved and tormented. He described his ambitions and ideals and his conception of the paradise wherein lived the people of the upper class. As he said, up above me, I knew, were unselfishness of the spirit, clean and noble thinking, keen intellectual living. I knew all this because I read seaside library novels in which, with the exception of the villains and adventuresses, all men and women thought beautiful thoughts, spoke a beautiful tongue, and performed glorious deeds. In short, as I accepted the rising of the sun, I accepted that up above me was all that was fine and noble and gracious, all that gave decency and dignity to life, and all that made life worth living, and all that remunerated one of his trivial and misery. He went on and traced his life in the mills, and learning of the horseshoeing trade in his meeting with the socialists. Among them, he said, he had found keen intellects and brilliant wits. Ministers of the gospel had been broken because their Christianity was too wide for any congregation or mammon worshippers, and professors who had been broken on the wheel of the university subservience to the ruling class. The socialists were revolutionaries, he said, struggling to overthrow the irrational society of the present and out of the material to build the rational society of the future. Much more, he said, that he would take too long to write, but I shall never forget how he described life among the revolutionists. All halting utterance vanished. His voice grew strong and confident, and it glowed as he glowed, and as the thoughts glowed that poured out from him. He said, amongst the revolutionists I found warm faith in the human ardent idealism, sweetness of unselfishness, renunciation and martyrdom, all the splendid stinging things of the spirit. Here life was clean, noble, and alive. I was in touch with great souls who exalted flesh and spirit over dollars and cents, and to whom the thin wall of the starved slum child meant more than all the pomp and circumstance of commercial expansions and world empire. All about me were nobleness of purpose and heroism of effort, and my days and nights were sunshine and starshine, all fire and dew, with both my eyes ever burning and blazing, the Holy Grail, Christ's own Grail, the warm, human, long-suffering, and maltreated, but to be recused and saved at last. So what he's saying is, you know, as he grew up, he read the comics and the books and the dime novels, and he assumed that the rich, because they had the dinner parties and the nice clothes, were good people. They were like, you know, they were pure and selfless and just this great crust of upper class. And here all the workers were dirty and somehow less than. He's saying he joined the revolutionists, and hey, it's like these are actually really good people, right? I think we have a different impression of that in modern day when you see all the stuff politically going on. Like, are they a bunch of pedophiles? Are they, you know, there isn't quite that same feel that the rich are somehow
all
the
holy.
good, all holy and good, right? They seem pretty dirty, general people, and that's sort of what he's saying. he's accusing him of being capitalist, but it just seems like
Poor ethics is what we've seen.
Right, criminals and yeah. But at the time, he sort of felt the upper class was somehow better and not just wealthier. As before, I've seen him transfigured, so now he stood transfigured before me. His brows were bright with the divine that was in him, and brighter yet shone in his eyes from the midst of the radiance that seemed to envelop him as a mantle. But the others did not see his radiance, and I assumed that it was due to the tears of joy and love that dimmed my vision. At any rate, Mr. Wixon, who sat behind me, was unaffected. I heard him sneer aloud, Utopian. Ernest went on to his rise in society till at last he came in touch with the members of the upper classes and rubbed shoulders with the men who sat in the high places. Then came his disillusionment, and this disillusionment he described in terms that did not flatter his audience. He was surprised at the commonness of the clay. Life proved not to be fine and gracious. He was appalled by the selfishness he encountered, and what he surprised him even more was that with the abundance of intellectual life fresh from his revolutionists, he was shocked by the intellectual stupidity of the master class, and then in spirit of their magnificent churches and well-paid preachers, he had found the masters, men and women, grossly material. It was true that they prattled sweet little ideals and dear little moralities, but he, in spite of their prattle, the dominant key of life they lived was materialistic, and they were without real morality. For instance, that which Christ had preached but would not preach, which was no longer preached. I met men, he said, who invoked the name of the Prince of Peace in their diatribes against war, and who put rifles in the hands of the Pinkertons with which to shoot down strikers in their own factories. I met men incoherent with indignation at the brutality of prize fighting, and who at the same time were parties to the adulteration of food that killed each year more babies than even red-handed Herod had killed. This delicate aristocrat-featured gentleman was a dummy dictator and a tool of corporation that secretly robbed widows and orphans. This gentleman, who collected fine editions and was a patron of literature, played blackmail to a heavy-jawed, black-browed boss of a municipal machine. This editor, who published patent medicine advertisements, called me a scoundrelly demagogue because I dared him to print in his paper the truth about patent medicines. This man, taking sobriety and earnestly about the beauties of idealism and the goodness of God, had just betrayed his comrades in a business deal. This man, a pillar of the church and heavy contributor to foreign missions, worked his shop girls 10 hours a day on a starvation wage and thereby directly encouraged prostitution. This man, who endowed chairs in universities and erected magnificent chapels, perjured himself in the courts of law over dollars and cents. This railroad magnate broke in his word as a citizen, as a gentleman, as a Christian, when he granted a secret rebate, and he granted many secret rebates. This senator, who was the tool and the slave, the little puppet of a brutal, uneducated machine boss, so was this governor and the Supreme Court judge, and all three rode on railroad passes. And also the sleek capitalists owned the machine boss, and the railroads that issued the passes. And so it was, instead of in paradise, that I found myself in the arid desert of commercialism. I found nothing but stupidity except for business. I found none clean, noble, and alive, though I found many who were alive with rottenness. What I did find was monstrous selfishness and heartlessness and a gross gluttonous practice and practical materialism. So, I mean, that seems applicable today. Yeah, it seems reasonably applicable today. Yeah.
Every political party and every culture.
The ultra rich, and yeah, it hasn't changed in 100+ years.
No, because people are still people.
116 years, yeah. Much more Ernest told themselves of his disillusionment. Intellectually, they had bored him. Morally and spiritually, they'd sickened him. So he was glad to go back to his revolutionists, who were clean, noble, and alive, and all the capitalists were not. And you can say capitalists, but I feel like that covers pretty much. It's not somehow exclusive to capitalists, And now he said, let me tell you about the revolution. Ernest began by describing the army of the revolution as he gave the figures of his strength, the votes cast in the various countries. The assemblage began to grow restless. Concern showed in their faces, and I noticed a tightening of lips. At last, the gauge of battle had been thrown down, He described the international organization of the socialists that united 1.5 million in the United States with 23.5 million in the rest of the world. Such an army of revolution, he said, 25 million strong, is the thing to make rulers and ruling classes pause and consider. The cry of this army is no quarter. We want all that you possess, and we will be content with nothing less than all that you possess. We want in our hands the reins of power and the destiny of mankind. Here in our hands, they are strong hands. We are going to take your governments, your palaces, and all your purple deeds away from you. And in that day you shall work for your bread, even as the peasant in the field or the starved and runty clerk in the metropolises. Here are our hands. They are strong hands. So I feel like that is still now. Like you still hear that kind of stuff now. 5 men, he said, can produce bread for 1,000. 1 man can produce cotton cloth for 250 people, woolens for 300, and boots and shoes for 1,000. One would conclude from that under capable management of society, modern civilized man would have a great deal better off than the caveman. But is he? Let us see. In the United States, there are 15 million people living in poverty, and by poverty is meant that the condition of life in which, through lack of food and adequate shelter, the mere standard of working efficiently cannot be maintained. In the United States today, in spite of all your so-called labor legislation, there are 3 million child laborers. In 12 years, their numbers have been doubled. And in passing, and I will ask you, managers of society, why do you not make the public the census figures of 1910? And I will ask you that you are afraid. I will answer for you that you are afraid the figures of misery, which would be participated in the revolution that is even now gathering. So obviously, we know we don't do the child labor anymore.
All right.
But I think the 15 million in poverty is probably the same number as today.
Oh,
I think you'd have to look it up, but I think there's still the same number of people living in poverty. There was the war on poverty. There's a lot done on poverty, and I think it's still 15 million, probably, despite spending trillions of dollars. There's still 15 million people living in poverty, and maybe that's a topic for another video.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. But to return to my indictment, if modern man produces power is 1,000 times greater than that of the caveman, why then in the United States today are there 15 million people who are not properly sheltered and properly fed? Why then in the United States today are there 3 million child laborers? It is a true indictment that the capitalist class has mismanaged in the face of the facts that modern lives more wretchedly than the caveman, and that his producing power is 1,000 times greater than that of the caveman. No other conclusion is possible than that the capitalist class is mismanaged, that you have mismanaged my masters, that you have criminally and selfishly mismanaged. And on this count, you cannot answer me here tonight, face to face, any more than can your whole class answer the 1.5 million revolutionists in the United States. You cannot answer. I challenge you to answer. And furthermore, I dare to say to you now that I've finished. You will not answer. On that point, you will be tongue-tied, though you will talk wordily enough about other things. You have failed in your management. You have made a shambles of civilization. You have blind and greedy. You have risen up as you today rise up shamelessly in your legislative halls and declare that profits were impossible without the toil of children and babies. Don't take my word for it. It is all in the records against you. You have lulled your consciousness to sleep with prattle of sweet ideals and dear moralities. You're fat with power and possession and drunken with success. And you have no more hope against us than that. Than have the drones clustered around the honey vats when the worker bees spring upon them to end their rotund existence. You have failed in your management of society, and your management is to be taken away from you. 1.5 million men of the working class say that you are going to get the rest of the working class to join them and take management away from you. This is a revolution, my masters. Stop it if you can. So I think this is where we get into the response. Colonel Van Gilbert did not notice the dozen men with passion-wrought faces who strove to get permission from him to speak. His own face was passion-wrought. He sprang to his feet, waving his arms, and for a moment could utter only incoherent sounds. Then speech was poured from him, and it was not the speech of $100,000 lawyer, nor was the rhetoric old-fashioned. Fallacy upon fallacy, he cried. Never in my life have I heard so many fallacies uttered in one short hour. And besides, young man, I must tell you that you have said nothing new. I learned all of that in college before you were born. Jean-Jacques Rousseau enunciated your socialist theory nearly 2 centuries ago. A return to the soil, forsooth. Reversion, our biology teaches the absurdity. It has been truly said that little learning is a dangerous thing, and you have exemplified it tonight with your madcap theories, fallacy upon fallacy. I was never so nauseated in my life with overplus of fallacy. That for your immature generalizations and childish reasonings. He snapped his fingers contemptuously and proceeded to sit down. There were lip exclamations of approval on the part of the women, and the hoarser notes of the confirmation came from the men. As for the dozen men who were clamoring for the floor, half of them began speaking at once. The confusion and babble was indescribable. Never had Mr. Petrowite's spacious walls beheld such a spectacle. Thus then were the cool captains of industry and lords of society, those snarling, growing savages in evening cloths. Truly Ernest had shaken them when he stretched out his hands for their money bags. His hands had appeared in the eyes as the hands of the 1,500,000 revolutionists. 1,500, yep, 1,500,000, 1.5 million. Ernest never lost his head in the situation. Before Colonel Van Gilbert had succeeded in sitting down, Ernest was on his feet and had sprung forward. One at a time, he roared at them. The sound arose from his great lungs and dominated the human tempest. By sheer compulsion of personality, he commanded silence. One at a time, he responded softly, "Let me answer Colonel Van Gilbert. After that, the rest of you can come at me, but one at a time. Remember, no mass plays here. This is not a football field." As for you, he went on, turning towards Colonel Van Gilbert, you have replied to nothing I have said. You have merely made a few excited and dogmatic assertions about my mental caliber. That may serve you in your business, but you can't talk to me like that. I'm not a working man, cap in hand, asking you to increase my wages or to protect me from the machine at which I work. You cannot be dogmatic with truth when you deal with me. Save that for the dealing with your wage slaves. They will not dare reply to you because you hold their bread and butter and their lives in their hands. As for this return to nature that you say you learned at college before I was born, permit me to point out that on face of it, you cannot have learned anything since. Socialism has no more to do with the state of nature than has differential calculus with the Bible class. I've called your class stupidity when outside of the realm of business. You, sir, have brilliantly exemplified my statement. Have a little sip here.
So nice how they insult each other.
Mm-hmm. Right,
It's
right.
such proper insulting.
So proper,
Yeah.
right? It would just be F you, F you, F you now.
Yeah, now it would be.
Right, the people knew how to insult each other in 1908.
Mm-hmm.
The
With
terrible,
eloquence.
right? The terrible castigation of her $100,000 lawyer was too much for Miss Brentwood's nerves. Her hysteria became violent, and she was helped weeping and laughing out of the room. It was just
I
that
can
she had
think
the
of it all those
hysteria.
old movies when they would slap.
Right, get the slap. She has the hysteria.
Right, they would slap women
Right.
in the movies, and they'd be like, "She has the hysteria."
She has the hysteria. Right. It was all just as well, for there was worse to
Wow.
follow. Don't take my word for it, Ernest continued. When the interruption had been led away, your own authorities with one unanimous voice will prove you stupid. Your own hired purveyors of knowledge will tell you that you are wrong. Go to your meekest little assistant in structure of a sociology and ask them what the difference is between Rousseau's theory of the return to nature and the theory of socialism. Ask your greatest orthodox bourgeois political economists and sociologists and question them through the pages of every textbook written on the subject and stored on the shelves of your subsidized libraries. And from one and all, the answer will be that there is nothing congruous between the return to nature and socialism. On the other hand, the unanimous affirmative answer will be that the return to nature and socialism are diametrically opposed to each other. As I say, don't take my word for it. The record of your stupidity is there in the books, your own books that you've never read. And so far as your stupidity is concerned, you are but the exemplar of your class. You know law and business, Colonel Van Gilbert. You know how to serve corporations and increase dividends by twisting the law. Very good. Stick to it. You're quite a figure. You're a very good lawyer, but you're a poor historian. You know nothing of sociology, and your biology is contemporaneous with Pliny.
You know nothing.
You know nothing,
Jon
Colonel
Snow.
Gilbert.
I hear that. I always think
Right.
of the same thing.
Here, Colonel Van Gilbert writhed in his chair. There was perfect quiet in the room. Everybody sat fascinated, paralyzed. I may say such fearful treatment of the great Colonel Van Gilbert was unheard of, undreamed of, impossible to believe. The great Colonel Van Gilbert, before whom judges trembled when he rose in court, Ernest never gave quarter to an enemy.
The great Van Gilbert.
The great Van Gilbert. This is, of course, no reflection of you, Ernest said. Every man to his trade. Only you stick to your trade and I'll stick to mine. You have specialized. When it comes to knowledge of the law, or how best to evade the law, or make new law for the benefit of thieving corporations, I'm down in the dirt at your feet. But when it comes to sociology, my trade, you're down in the dirt at my feet. Remember that. Remember also that your law is the stuff of a day, and that you're not versatile in the stuff of more than a day. Therefore, your dogmatic assertions and rash generalizations on things historical and sociology are not worth the breath you waste on them. Ernest paused for a moment and regarded him thoughtfully, noting his face dark and twisted with anger, his panting chest, his writhing body, and his slim white hands nervously clutching and unclutching.
Quite descriptive.
Quite descriptive. But it seems you have breath to use, and I'll give you a chance to use it. I indicted your class. Show me that my indictment is wrong. I pointed out to you the wretchedness of modern man, 3 million child slaves in the United States, without whose labor profits would not be possible, and 15 million underfed, ill-clothed, and worse-housed people. I pointed out that modern man's producing power through social organization and the use of machinery was 1,000 times greater than that of the caveman, and I stated that from these two facts, no other conclusion was possible than the capitalist class had mismanaged. This was my indictment. I specifically and at length challenged you to answer it. Nay, I did more. I prophesied that you would not answer. It remains for your breath to smash my prophecy. You called my speech fallacy. Show the fallacy. Colonel Van Gilbert answered the indictment that I and my 1,500,000 comrades had fought against your class and you. Colonel Van Gilbert quite forgot that he was presiding and that in courtesy he should permit the other clamorers to speak. He was on his feet, flinging his arms, his rhetoric, and his control to the winds, alternately abusing Ernest for his youth and demagoguery and savagely attacking the working class, elaborating its inefficiency and worthlessness. For a lawyer, you're the hardest man to keep to a point I ever saw, Ernest began his answer to the trial. My youth has nothing to do with what I've enunciated, nor has the worthlessness of the working class. I have charged the capitalist class with having mismanaged society. You have not answered. You have made no attempt to answer. Why? Is it because you have no answer? You're the champion of this whole audience. Everyone here, except for me, is hanging on your lips for that answer. They're hanging on your lips for the answer because they have no answer themselves. As for me, as I've said before, I know that you cannot answer, but you will not attempt to answer. This is intolerable, Colonel Van Gilbert cried out. This is insult. That you should not answer is intolerable, Ernest gravely replied. No man can be intellectually insulted. Insult in its very nature is emotional. Recover yourself. Give me an intellectual answer to my intellectual charge that the capitalist class has mismanaged society. Colonel Van Gilbert remained silent, a sullen, superior expression on his face, such as will appear on the face of the man who will not brandy words with a ruffian. Do not be downcast, Ernest said. Take consolation in the fact that no member of your class has ever yet answered that charge. He turned to the other men who are anxious to speak. And is now your chance. Fire away, and do not forget that I here challenge you to give the answer that Colonel Van Gilbert has failed to give. It would be impossible for me to write all that was said in the discussion. I never realized before how many words could be spoken in 3 short hours. At any rate, it was glorious. The more his opponents grew excited, the more Ernest deliberately excited them. He had encyclopedic command of the field of knowledge, and by a word or a phrase, by delicate rapier thrusts, he punctured them. He named the points of their logic. This was a false syllogism that concluded it had no connection with the premise, while the next premise was an impostor because it had cunningly hidden it in the conclusion that was being attempted to be proved. This was an error that was all assumption, and the next was an assertion contrary to ascendant truth as printed in all the textbooks. And so it went. Sometimes he exchanged the rapier for the club and went smashing amongst their thoughts right and left. And he always demanded facts and refused to discuss theories. And his facts made for them a Waterloo when they attacked the working class. Right. He was always retorted the pot calling the kettle black. That is no answer to the charge that your own face is dirty. And to one and all, he said, why have you not answered the charge that your class is mismanaged? You have all talked about other things and things concerning other things, but you have not answered. Is it because you have no answer? It was at the end of the discussion that Mr. Wixon spoke. He was the only one that was cool, and Ernest treated him with respect. He had not accorded the others. No answer is necessary, Mr. Wixon said with slow deliberation. I have followed the whole discussion with amazement and disgust. I am disgusted with you gentlemen, members of my class. You have behaved like foolish little schoolboys. What with the intruding ethics and the thunder of the common politician in such a discussion, you have been out generalized and outclassed. You have been very wordy, and all you have done is buzz. You have buzzed like gnats about a bear. Gentlemen, that there stands the bear, he pointed to Ernest, and your buzzing has only tickled his ears. Believe me, the situation is serious. The bear reached out with his paws tonight to crush us. He has said there are 1.5 million revolutionaries in the United States. That is a fact. He has said that there's intentions to take away from our governments, our palaces, and all our purpled ease. That is also a fact. A great change is coming in society, but happily, it may not be the change the bear anticipates. The bear has said that he will crush us. What if we crush the bear? The throat rumble rose in the great room. The man nodded with endorsement and certitude. Their faces set hard. There were fighters, that was certain. But not by buzzing will we crush the bear, Mr. Wixon went on coldly and dispassionately. We will hunt the bear. We will not reply to the bear in words. Our reply shall be crouched in the terms of lead. We are in power. Nobody will deny it. By virtue of that power, we shall remain in power. He suddenly turned upon Ernest. The moment was dramatic. This, then, is our answer. We have no words to waste on you. When you reach out your vaulted, strong hands for our palaces and purple ease, will show you what strength is. In the roar of shell and shrapnel and the whine of machine guns, will answer will be couched. We will grind your revolutionaries down under our heel, and we shall walk upon your faces. The world is ours. We are its lords, and ours it shall remain. As for the host of labor, it has been in the dirt since history began, and I read history all right. And as in the dirt it shall remain, as long as I and mine and those that come after us have the power. There is the word. It is the king of words, power. Not God, not mammon, but power. Power. Pour it over your tongue as it tingles with it, power. I am not answered. Ernest said quietly, is the only answer that could be given. Power is what we, the working class, preach. We know, and we all know by bitter experience that no appeal for the right, justice, for humanity can ever touch you. Your hearts are as hard as your heels with which you'll tread upon the faces of the poor. We have preached power by the power of our ballots. On election day, we will take your government away from you. What if you do get a majority, a sweeping majority on election day? Mr. Wilkerson broke in to demand. Suppose we refuse to turn the government over to you after you have captured it all at the ballot box. That also we have considered, Ernest replied, and we shall give you an answer in terms of the lead. Power you have proclaimed, the king of words, very good, power it shall be. And in the day that we sweep a victory at the ballot box and you refuse to turn over the government, we have constitutionally and peacefully captured, and you demand what we are going to do about it. In that day, I say, we shall answer you. In the roar of shell and shrapnel and the whine of machine gun shall our answer be couched. Kind of feels like 2024.
It's like, what does that remind you of?
Right. Kind of feels like 2024 here, guys. I realize it is 1908. Feels a little like 2024 for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why that would remind me of 2024. Feels a little bit like it. You cannot escape us. It is true that you have read history all right. It is true that labor has, from the beginning of its history, been in the dirt. It is equally true that as so long as you and yours and those that have come after you have power, the labor shall remain in the dirt. I agree with you. I agree with all that you have said. Power will be the arbiter, as it always has been the arbiter. It is a struggle of classes, just as your class dragged down the old feudal nobility, so shall it be dragged down by my class, the working class. If you will read your biology and your sociology as clearly as you do your history, you'll see this. And I have described as inevitable. It does not matter whether it's 1 year, 10, or 10,000. You shall be dragged down, and it shall be done by power. We of the labor hosts have conned the world till our minds are a tingle with it. Power is a kingly word. And so ended the night with the Philomaths. Yeah, I mean, that feels like that could be 2024 right now.
Yeah.
You know, flip, forget, put whatever you want, the capitalists, the socialists, the Republicans, the Democrats. It feels very relevant to where we're at right now. Drop down here. How far can we get? 40 minutes in. Chapter 6, Abumerations. I'm not even sure what that word is. Abumerations? Abumerations? Adumerations?
No.
All right. I'm dyslexic. Adumerations.
That's why I told you it was a D.
Right. Avis Earnhardt quickly learns more about socialism. She encounters a new coolness from her friends and assumes they do not approve of her impending marriage to someone of a lower class. Dr. John Cunningham is recommended at the universities for his private life. According to Cunningham, the university offers him 2 years vacation on full pay in Europe for recreation and research. Cunningham turns it down, but Ernest Everhart encourages him to accept the offer. After some thought, Cunningham declines, and he says, "He shall stand by my gun." So it just shows that because he's stepping away, because Cunningham's stepping away from the popular ideology. Mm-hmm. Basically, he's being rejected from society, cast out.
He should have taken the deal.
Should have taken taken the money, took 2 years off.
And came back with a different idea.
Right.
Or maybe don't talk politics at your work.
Don't talk politics at work. Right. He was taking politics.
There's that too.
And he was destroyed for it. Once again, that happens now. Right.
Yeah.
That actually happens now. You talk politics in the wrong place and you're out.
Right.
People get doxxed and people get all sorts of stuff.
Canceled.
People get canceled. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically, you could say in 1908, Dr. John Cunningham got canceled.
He got canceled. Yeah.
He got canceled.
Yeah.
Lost everything. Chapter 7, The Bishop's Vision. Let's see. Man.
Can't do it. You're looking at it going, I can't do it.
All right, we'll do it. I want to be done with this. I want to be done with this. I want to be done with this.
I'm not sure what vision it was.
I know. I want to be done with
one.
This. All right. Avis asked Ernest about Bishop Morehouse. Ernest had taken Morehouse on a tour of the slums to show him how sick American society truly is. Ernest tells Avis and Dr. Cunningham that Morehouse is soul sick from the journey through hell. Ernest also reveals that he received a government job offer as a United States Commissioner of Labor that he does not plan to take. Ernest Avis attend a speech by Bishop Morehouse in which he strongly condemns capitalism. Avis believes that his speech will finally make the people of our class or capitalists see the correctness of Ernest's arguments. She sees reporters scribbling like mad as Morehouse delivers his remarks. However, Ernest tells her not a word will appear in tomorrow's papers. The papers will print that Morehouse is in ill health or something of that nature. He is right. The next day, the papers print that Morehouse has been overcome by his feelings during the speech.
Right. Not the speech he wanted to say.
Right. Bishop Morehouse arose and abruptly began. So he's reading through. He gives a speech. I may not read this one. It's in the book. Read the book. It's in the speech. He gets canceled.
Oh, the bishop got canceled.
He gets
too.
Canceled. Right.
Absolutely.
They cancel the bishop.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep going. Chapter 8, The Machine Breakers. Yeah, this one's pretty good too. Okay. Dr. John Cunningham hosts what's called a Profit and Loss dinner.
I feel like you liked this book.
I did like the book.
Yeah.
I did like the book. For middle-class businessmen at his home, Ernest Everhart and Avis Everhart attended as well. The small capitalists are being squeezed out of big business and trusts, and Ernest listens to their woes. A trust is a group of businesses with similar interests who together hold substantial market power. Ernest lectures these businessmen on their being capitalists despite not benefiting from capitalism. Some of the businesses have formed a new political party to fight the trust, that because they believe the trust control the old parties. They've had some successes with this in capturing the state legislator in Oregon. However, Ernest tells them his action is futile. The trust will eventually own the government. The businessmen deny it and say they will fight it. It will start a militia if they have to. Ernest tells them that the U.S. government has already made it a requirement that they be drafted into the U.S. Army. He tells the Congress pass the law secretly. Sorry, super dry throat. The newspapers made no mention of it. The businessmen insisted the country would never have permitted it. But Ernest tells them the country has already permitted it. So basically, the businessmen are saying, if the things keep going how they're going, they're going to start a militia to take on the government. And Ernest just points out, well, they'll just draft you.
Yeah.
They'll draft you into the army, right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of an interesting.
Can't be in your militia.
Right. You can't have your little militia. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You really
he's
really
let him know what threw the monkey wrench in that.
Yeah. I might skip this.
Plan of theirs.
I'll skip this one here. Yeah, that's way too much. I'm skipping. Still scrolling.
I mean, get the book.
Get the book.
There's some.
Check out chapter 8. There's a lot of good stuff there.
There's some good speeches.
There's some good speeches there. Yeah. The mathematics of a dream. Oh, I'm still going. Ernest asserts that it is inevitable the small capitalist, large capitalist trusts, and anything else capitalism produces shall pass away. He makes the argument the United States has a surplus and will eventually have nowhere to spend it. How much do I have here? I will just read this part. He explains the United States produces $4 billion of wealth in a year. Labor receives $2 billion from that. Even if laborers are making $2 billion, spend all the money, there's still a $2 billion surplus. The United States can invest in foreign markets, but they too will eventually develop a surplus after developing all their resources. Therefore, capitalists do not consume their share, and if they did, the sum total capitalism would remain consistent instead as increased year over year. Ernest summarized that every country will eventually have a surplus. He asks the small capitalist, where will your capitalist system be then? The small capitalists do not have an answer, but Ernest does. Capitalist system will break down under its own profits. And that may have made sense in 1908.
Because that, to me, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook.
Right. Yeah. It may have made sense in 1908, which is, where's all the money going to go? Where's all the profit going to go?
It's called a global marketplace.
Right. Right. Well, and it's Elon Musk.
It's cyclical. It goes back.
Elon Musk worth however many hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yes, but
it's Jeff Bezos worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
Of course, they're worth billions, but it's paper money. It's funny money. It's not money that gets generated back into the economy.
And you've got people, some rich people, Bill Gates, do their philanthropy. They start their charities. You've got people like Elon Musk, love him or hate him, that's doing a mission to Mars. Right. So the idea that the capitalism would collapse under profit is just silly. Like maybe it made sense in 1908.
I don't even know.
Right. It doesn't. It didn't. Here we are 120 years later.
It still doesn't make sense.
Right. 120 years later, it still hasn't collapsed under its own profits.
No.
Right. It just doesn't work like that. But it made sense then. And maybe still
to me, that makes no sense because y'all want the profit.
Right. They want to keep the profit.
It's not going to collapse if you give the profit to the company.
Yeah, we want the profit. Right. They want to keep it.
But if the rich folks keep it, then it's going to collapse.
So you
see the I mean, just
it's the fallacy.
The libbity-bibbity part of what this is. It's people just talking.
It's easy to explain, and you roll through it. You're like, yeah, that makes complete sense. It's all going to collapse, right? Where's all the money going to go? But it doesn't work like that. It never did. 100 years later.
Never did.
120 years later.
Yeah.
196 years later, it still hasn't collapsed.
I mean, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul here on our Social Security.
Right, 116 years. I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, like it's
right. It doesn't collapse.
It doesn't.
All right, so Ernest has a solution.
An economics class.
Right, Ernest has a solution to collapse, to capitalism falling apart under its own weight.
Right, give it to all of us.
Give it to us. Yeah, give it to us.
Give it to us. It won't collapse.
It won't collapse. Right. The laborers should be in charge. Then they would do only enough work to prevent a surplus and thus create an economic system that would be sustainable. The small capitalists point out that the middle class is stronger than the working class in terms of sheer numbers. Ernest then states the strength of the proletariat is in our fingers to pull triggers. A proletariat is a person who is working class and is usually mentioned in connection with Karl Marx's communist philosophy. Ernest's point is the middle class has a strength that can be taken away from them. The proletariats have a strength that cannot, which is not really. Any strength can be taken away, but it doesn't matter.
In a second.
Right.
Canceled.
So I've got a lot of pages here of the argument, of the nitty gritty. I'm not going to read it.
Of his gobbledygook?
Of the gobbledygook. Of the gobbledygook.
This was a really...
It was gobbledygook for you.
This was a really hard... this was a really hard
I got a lot of pages here, too.
Because I mean, I read his stuff, and all I thought to myself is, when is this going to be over?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I can't.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, chapter 10, the vortex. Avis Everhart quickly becomes a revolutionist. This changes her fortunes and those of her father. The university employed by Dr. Cunningham lets him go. He got canceled. His recently published book disappears from circulation as well, and his publisher declines to republish it. Ernest Everhart summarizes that the book is being suppressed. So he just got canceled. That's all we call it now. They didn't know back then that you get canceled. If you step out against the ruling party, you get canceled.
Well, I'm going to say that if his book was about that gobbledygook that we just heard in the chapter before that, they did him a favor by making him not look like unintelligent.
Yeah. Avis reports the Socialist Party nominates Ernest to run for Congress. The Iron Heel suppresses a series of strikes, and the Socialist Party gains more support. Violence ensures as the strikebreakers hired by the capitalists brutally break up the strikes. The federal government deploys soldiers. Cities become armed camps and laborers are shot. The rich and the middle class first team up to defeat the working class. Wall Street manipulates the values of land so it's worthless. Then, according to Avis, the captains of industry turn on the middle class. Small businesses and manufacturers are crushed under the trust. Ernest gives up hope that the working class can gain power through representation in Congress and sets his hopes on revolution instead. So this was interesting. I wanted to read this. 1908 feels very 2024. They had a group called the Black Hundreds. The Black Hundreds are being organized in the United States. He said this is the beginning. There will be more of it. The Iron Heel is getting bold. The Black Hundreds were reactionary mobs organized by the perishing autocracy in the Russian Revolution. These reactionary groups attacked the revolutionary groups and also had needed moats, robbed and destroyed property so as to afford the autocracy the pretext of calling out the Cossacks. And so the Black Hundreds, they wore black. It was a group of people that wore black.
We didn't have hoodies back then, so
it wasn't black hoodies. Yeah, it was a group of people that wore black that seemed to somehow react in mobs and attack the people
they were paid.
Like.
Protesters. To go.
Yeah. Make chaos. They're anarchists.
So
even though they're saying they're fighting the capitalists, the Black Hundreds are clearly just anarchists working for the government. Don't know how that relates to anything nowadays.
I don't know.
Can't imagine.
I can't find any parallels at all.
Can't find any parallels at all. And so, Parrish Father's book, we were to see much of the Black Hundreds as the days went by, week by week. More of the socialist papers were barred from the malls, and the number of instances the Black Hundreds destroyed the socialist press. Of course, the newspapers of the land lived up in the reactionary policy of the ruling class and destroyed the socialist press was misrepresented and vilified, while the Black Hundreds were represented as true patriots and saviors of society. So convincing was all the misrepresentation that even sincere ministers in the pulpit praised the Black Hundreds while regretting the necessity of violence. So the Black Hundreds. 1908. The Great Adventure, Chapter 11. We're going to get through this here. Because I'm done with this book. Dr. Cunningham runs into old boss Wixon at the university, who offers to reinstate him in a better job than his old position. He also threatens Dr. Cunningham, and Miss Avis Wickerson tells Dr. Cunningham that the oligarchy will walk upon the faces of the working class, and they will do the same to him and Avis if he and Avis continue to associate with Ernest.
That's not dramatic or anything.
Right. The oligarchy is a small group of rich capitalists, or whoever happens to run the government now, working to protect their money and power. Dr. Cunningham has stock in the Sarah Mill.
No, you don't.
Yeah, but he does not receive his quarterly dividends. Dr. Cunningham inquires about it with the secretary, and the secretary tells him they have no record of him owning any stock in the mill. He tries to get his stock papers from a safe deposit box at the bank and discovers the box is empty. They took his money. They locked out his bank account.
Yeah.
Just like happens now.
Right.
Like Jackson, he fails to get anything with Sierra Mill when he sues. The bank forecloses on the Cunningham home. Ernest and Avis marry. They move with Dr. Cunningham into what Avis calls 4 wretched rooms, a slum in San Francisco.
So he should have taken the deal and taken 2 years
they offered him
gone
the
to
deal.
Europe and found himself again.
Right, they offered him the deal. Yeah.
Yeah, but he didn't.
4 wretched rooms. San Francisco is still a slum 116 years later. The Bishop, Ernest Everhart, just chapter 12, reason. Right. Chapter 12, The Bishop, Ernest Everhart learns that Bishop Morehouse is placed in a private mental institute, super canceled, for preaching that the church is strayed from his principles. So
you're going to hell for canceling the bishop.
He canceled the bishop and sent him to a mental institute.
Yeah.
Davis tries to help him, but is blocked by a return.
They did the bishop wrong, I'll say that.
Eventually, Morehouse pretends to recover and is released. He went to the re-education camp. Davis visits him soon after finds out he sold all his possessions and then disappears.
He was on the lam.
He was.
Yeah.
Avis encounters Morehouse in her neighborhood butcher shop by accident. She insists on taking him back to her family's apartment. Morehouse tells the Everharts.
I think he was getting lamb chops that day, too.
He might have been.
Yeah. Which was
that he'd been taking care of the poor, just the way he lectured others should. He has never been healthier, but he reveals he is still persecuted by the Iron Heel. Morehouse rents rooms in different rooming houses and never stays in one place for very long. Morehouse thanks Ernest Everhart for showing me the path. Even though Morehouse looks worse off financially, he seems much healthier. He likes his new life despite the hardship. So he sold everything. He got super canceled.
Yeah, he sold his house. He sold all his possessions. He had millions.
He had millions. Millions in 1908, millions.
Yeah, which is a lot.
Not equivalent, but
which
millions.
I feel like he was stealing the church's money.
He might have been. Might have been a little dirty.
Technically not his.
Right. Sold it all.
The church bought him.
But he went on the street to help the poor. He gave it all to help the poor. Yeah.
Which was nice. But that's,
he found his mission.
Robin Hood stuff.
Yeah. Chapter 13, the general strike. Okay, that's short. Ernest is elected to Congress in 1912. He wins by a landslide.
Of course.
According to Avis, the Iron Heel destroys William Randolph Hearst's 1863 to 1951 newspaper company by taking away from him his advertising, like they do to Twitter.
Yeah.
That's what happens to Twitter.
Uh-huh.
They took away his advertising.
Yeah.
Sort of funny.
Way to generate money.
Right. They did the exact same thing to Elon Musk. Not that it relates. This was written in 1908.
Right.
But they did just try to destroy Twitter, taking away his advertising. Avis does not elaborate on how the Iron Heel achieves this. She reports that the middle class is much less powerful than in the recent past. This includes the farmer who react by withdrawing from the market altogether. They buy nothing and sell nothing and opt for a primitive barter system between themselves. However, the plutocracy raises farmers' taxes and they have to sell their land to pay the taxes. So the farmers tried to disassociate from society by just switching to a barter system, and they just shut them down. The government shut them down, the evil government. Most socialists assume the end of capitalism has come. However, the powers of capitalism or government divide the socialists or just the people. Avis asserts the only party captures several seats in the state legislature, only to find that the incumbents refuse to retire and the courts were in the hands of the oligarchy. The oligarchy is a small group of rich capitalists who work against the socialists to protect their money and power. Socialist Party is without any power for socialists. Avis reports the world war breaks out. The United States prepares to fight. Avis states that the oligarchy wants war because it has much to gain. A war would use up the national surplus, put people to work and soldiers to the army. Avis supports the socialists band together internationally to prevent the oligarchy from benefiting. The socialists stop the war. It's a world war. It's good for the government. So they did. They did stop the war. Do we have anything on that, or was that it? No, let's keep going. There was a war with Germany. Sort of predicted that way ahead of time.
Yeah.
Right. But they did this big strike, global strike. They somehow stopped the war. Chapter 14. Amazing. The beginning of the end. Avis Everhart asserts that Ernest Everhart sees the truth trend of affairs. He tries to get his comrades to see it as well, but they will not be swayed with their belief that the end of capitalism is near. Socialists in other countries make headway in instituting socialism in their governments, but American socialists do not because they do not have enough political or judicial power. Ernest and Avis meet with the other labor leaders. One reveals that he has a plan, but he's coy about it. This triggers Ernest's suspicions. He tells them he thinks that the other leaders have made terms with the enemy. The leader tactfully admits, and Ernest summarizes, this means the Iron Heel has prevented a general strike by subsidizing unions. He predicts better working conditions for workers in various industries will lead to the unions' general weakening. Ernest asserts the smaller unions will be ground out of existence. Avis disagrees with Ernest. When he tells her this, she still disagrees with him, and she writes the Everhart manuscript because she believes that in the next revolt, the socialists will be victorious. However, she does ask Ernest how the oligarchy will use its surplus. The oligarchy is a small group of rich capitalists, or just government in general, who plot against the working class to protect their money and power. Ernest predicts the oligarchy will find a way. They will build great roads, invest in science, and become art collectors. The oligarchy.
How horrible to build great roads and
science,
infrastructure.
Yeah. The oligarchy will build new and beautiful cities. Ernest predicts the surplus will constantly expand at the expense of the laborers. So essentially I think so. They basically created sort of a stronger working class that would be more on the side of the government. Mm-hmm. Is sort of what they're saying they did. Lemonade, of course.
It's good lemonade.
Drinking the lemonade. Chapter 15. We're actually getting there. We're going to get through this tonight.
Okay, let's do it.
We're going to get through this tonight. We can do it. We're going to power through it.
I'm in for it.
I'm in for it. Ernest's predictions come to pass in January 1913. Newspapers publicize the deal between the unions and the oligarchy. Steel, iron, and railroad workers receive a raise in pay and see their work hours shortened. The oligarchy gives workers opportunities for profit sharing. The unions that participate in this see this as a good thing, but the unions that are not offered this option react violently. The members of those unions attack and sometimes kill the union members who get more benefits from the oligarchy. This behavior bleeds out into the culture, and Avis calls the members who make the deal with the oligarchy traitors. Traitor union members and their families are ostracized in every place in society.
Wasn't that the whole point? They were trying to get all of that
They were trying to get all that stuff. They just don't like how they got it.
Just wasn't enough.
They just didn't like how they got it. Governments worldwide continue to fall. Imperialists have trouble hanging on to their colonies. England loses Canada as a colony, which I guess, I don't know, 1908. That seems a little weird.
I don't know.
I don't know either. Why do they speak French?
I'm not Canadian.
Yeah, I don't know. However, the Iron Heel helps Canada crush its socialist revolution. The Iron Heel helps Mexico and Cuba suppress revolts in those countries. These successes turn the tide in favor of the Iron Heel. Avis states the Iron Heel is firmly established in the New World. More violence in the United States means socialists cannot agree on enough to join together and be an influence on American politics. Ernest asks, how can we hope for solidarity with all these cross purposes and conflicts? Socialist problems are compounded by a religious revival in America. That was 15. 16 called the end, but it's not. They just called it that. Avis Everhart and Ernest Everhart leave for Washington. Avis states the old order has passed away and the socialists who were elected to Congress are seated. Their situation goes smoothly, but Avis laughingly reports that Ernest cannot help but see this is an ominous sign and think of revolution. A subset of socialists and the Grangers. The Grangers are a faction of the revolutionaries. They have won seats in government at the state level. However, the incumbents refuse to leave office and tie up the results of the election in red tape. Avis and Ernest sense danger. If the Grangers become violent, the socialist movement is lost. Ernest and the leaders of the Grangers work together to keep a lid on violence, but once again, the oligarchy is working behind the scenes to stir up violence by pitting the Grangers against the rest of the socialists. The oligarchy is a small group of rich capitalists who plot against the revolutionaries to protect their money and power. Avis accused the oligarchy of causing the peasant revolts. Revolts explode in 12 states. Avis accused the Iron Heel of disguising themselves as farmers who take forceful possessions of state governments. So basically, they stand false flags. According to Avis, the mobs loot buildings and destroy factories. The oligarchy sees to it that liquor is distributed to the lower classes or crack. Now it's crack liquor to encourage them to vandalize and be violent. Avis reports that 11,000 people are shot and killed
randomly out of nowhere.
Now it's just crack. They don't give them liquor now. They give them crack. Shot and killed in Sacramento. The national government takes over the state. California's government. The same types of activities happen in other states as well. Mayhem insurance. According to Avis, the militia law of 1903 is instituted. She asserts the workers in one state are required to shoot their comrade workers in other states. Many men escape to the mountains to avoid joining the militia. The ensuing revolts are easily crushed by the Iron Heel, but the socialists use what Avis calls the fighting groups. The fighting groups weed out any agent provocateurs or people working to secretly undermine the socialist movement. I know you're done with this book too. The opposing group plants spies in each other's midst. Each side is left to the guess at the other's movements. People in the socialist movement disappear. People can't trust each other because no one knows when they're dealing with an agent of the Iron Heel. People betray what Avis calls the cause or killed by the people who are loyal. And you see this now, right? I mean, how many conservative groups has the FBI infiltrated? All of them. All of them. Right. Same thing. Same thing, but 1908. All right. Granger's states are destroyed and the Grangers in Congress disappeared. This results in the socialists being a pitiful minority. Most of the proletariats or working class people are starving because of the disruption. Anthony Meredith notes that this is similar to what happened in India in the 19th century when Britain colonized it. Indians starved while the Indian resources went to the British. Avis states that the poor become the people of the abyss, which Meredith annotates is a phrase coined by the writer H.G. Wells, who inspired Jack London. Creepy. Ernest and compadres in Congress try to pass a bill designed to help the unemployed, but get nowhere. The day Ernest speaks on the floor of Congress, armed soldiers are lining the halls. A bomb goes off. I promise, just lemonade. Avis is arrested along with the socialist congressman. Ernest Davis and the other congressional socialists are put on trial for high treason. Meredith announced that Avis does not include the outcome of the socialist trial for high treason. He reports 52 people were put on trial and all were found guilty. No one received a death sentence. He relates Ernest Everett, 11 others received life in prison. So false flag attack on Congress, and all the people were imprisoned. You don't want that. We're getting through this here. We'll go. Chapter 18. We're actually pretty close. We're super close here. Avis Everhart is kept in prison for 6 months without charges being brought against her. That happens now. One of the jailers.
Or a year or so.
Right. 3 years, 6 years, whatever. One of her jailers reveals himself as a revolutionist during her second month there. The prison doctor reveals himself to be one of the fighting groups. The fighting groups were formed to spy on the Iron Heel. Avis reports that she is in prison 3,000 miles away from Ernest Everhart, who is in prison on the Pacific coast. They write letters back and forth. The prisoner is able to communicate freely and decide to refrain from breaking out of prison. So everybody's in jail. Chapter 19. We're on page 80 of 83 of the notes.
Nice.
Yeah. When Avis is released, she goes into hiding, makes arrangement to hide Ernest. Avis disguises herself as the wife or daughter of an oligarch. Avis arrives in California, taken by boat to the hiding place she has secured for Ernest. She readies the place at home for her and Ernest. Avis reports that Dr. John Cunningham disappeared.
Their little love shack.
Right. They got the little love cave. They're hiding out. She stops receiving the letters. Comrades can't find him. Avis hides for months, stays busy, making propaganda and spying. Mm-hmm. She learns that Bishop Morehouse has moved from asylum to asylum. They track him down, but the trail goes cold after they find records at a few asylums. Avis reports there was no record of his death, and they assume he somehow escaped. 20. We're getting there. Mm-hmm. Chapter 20.
It really is, chapter 20.
These
were really short chapters.
Yeah, they were short chapters. Avis Earhart and her comrades help 51 of 52 congressmen escape. Avis Earhart joins her at their hiding place, and they spend next year and a half together there. Oligarch Philip Wickerson stumbles on the refuge, and they capture him and turn him into a member of the revolution. They later release him back to the oligarchs. Right, because they're living on some
rich dude's land.
Yeah, they capture the kid.
Go figure.
Right, and they flip him, basically. They capture the dude's kid, they flip him. Yeah, they flip the son to their side. Probably change his gender, I don't know.
They had no problem.
Right.
building on this dude's land.
Yes, yeah, they had a little
They're
secret
just
hideout
on this guy's land, who's completely against their cause.
The revolutionists learned that the oligarchy is succeeding, creating a government machine despite their efforts to scum up the works. The oligarchy is a small group of rich capitalists who plot the revolutionists to protect their money and power. The revolutionists find out the world is much as it was at the beginning. The skilled laborers have been working conditions and better pay and still not care for their unskilled labor brothers. The revolutionaries learn that the mercenaries live in their own cities where they self-govern. The oligarch class continues to work and rule. The unskilled working class and the poor, who Avis calls the people of the abyss, have trouble surviving. Ernest and Avis emerge from the hiding, disguised as brother and sister, to hide from the mercenaries. The mercenaries have been hired by the oligarch to kill the socialist leaders or whomever they deem as socialists. Oh, wow. That's the whole battle for Chicago.
Chicago Commune. Yeah.
I've got one paragraph. So there was the battle for Chicago. Right. There was the battle for Chicago. That was the big action scene. Ernest Effard and the other socialist leaders staged the first revolt in Chicago, which is the oligarchy's heart. The oligarchy is a small group of rich capitalists who plot against the working class to protect their money and power. The goal is to cripple the oligarchy by blowing up what Avis calls its wireless stations or radios, as well as bridges, tunnels. However, the oligarchy is alerted to the plan. The Iron Heel causes violence and mayhem. It bombs areas of Chicago as fighting breaks out between the mercenaries and the revolutionaries. The mercenaries kill many socialists. So
couldn't even get a good Italian beef.
Could no Italian beef. And that's the battle for Chicago. That was pretty big. It was the only real action scene, I think, in the whole book. Yeah, there was a lot that went on. Essentially, the socialists, as part of plotting the revolution, had sort of coordinated their go time for the revolution.
Yeah.
Right. They had all the groups lined up everywhere. They were going to attack the telegraph machines. They had all these attacks coordinated. Of course, they had been infiltrated.
Yeah.
The group had been infiltrated. The government already knew they were planning all the attacks.
Yeah.
So before they could launch their attacks, the government chose Chicago as the battleground, and they tricked the people into Chicago thinking the attack had started.
Right.
So they were going to blow up all the telegram stations. They had us elaborate. All these attacks countrywide were going to happen at the same time. Government knew it. So by triggering Chicago to thinking the attack had started, of course, the government had all their forces there, and they were able just to wipe out all the separatists in Chicago. Killed many socialists. That was chapter 23. Chapter 24, Nightmare. Ernest Effard rescues Avis Effard from the mayhem in Chicago, and they leave with permission from the authorities. So they had infiltrated the government under different identities, right? And they were able to sneak in and sort of play both sides during the revolt, during the battle. When they were by the revolutionaries, they're like, we're with you. And when the government forces were there, they were like, we're with you. So they were able to avoid and sort of zigzag their way through the Revolution War in Chicago. Their progress is slow because all the carnage in the city. Ernest discovers the body of Bishop Morehouse, among many others. On the way out of town, Ernest vows the socialists will rise again. Avis and Ernest arrive back in New York. They take stock of their losses and losses of socialism. Many socialists are upset and resort to the tactics of terrorism. Avis disavows their alliance with these factions. Ernest and other leaders work to rebuild the cause and its true intent, which is to improve the lives of the working class. The manuscript ends with Avis saying the magnitude of the task may be understood when it is taken into. And that's it. That's where the book ends. But it ends at the beginning, because at the beginning, so the idea is she wrote this manuscript. That's where the manuscript ends. But then the manuscript is discovered hundreds of years later and sort of narrated. So the narrator in the beginning of the book tells you the ending of the book.
Tarantino in that bad.
Right. So they tell you the ending at the beginning, which is the struggle went on for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Right. So this was one of many battles, one of many struggles, goes on for hundreds of years. So I missed it the first time I read the book because you're not necessarily digging deep, paying attention in the first couple pages. You just kind of diving in. You don't realize they gave you the ending.
Right.
Right. You don't expect.
I was just glad it was over.
Right. You don't expect they gave you the ending, but they gave you the ending at the beginning. So when you get to the ending, it's just an abrupt end. So that's it. That was the Iron Heel. is 4 hours. 4 hours of walking through the Iron Heel. I think it's summertime. It's summertime here.
Yeah, summer.
We're enjoying closing that. Yeah, we're enjoying summertime here. So we're probably gonna put the book club on hold.
Yeah.
At this point, we could be out in the pool. Summer. We could be out in the pool enjoying margaritas.
Yeah. I could be sitting with my pigs.
Floating in the pool. So we're probably gonna put the book club on hold. We've been doing this for a little while. I'm not saying we won't come back to it. A lot of books we want to cover. A lot of books I've been reading. Just finished For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Right.
Reading a couple prepper books. I did a prepper financial guide that I might do some videos on. I'm reading a pipe hitter's guide that's pretty cool. That's kind of a fun one. Going into Tale of Two Cities, which was French Revolution. I've got that already downloaded. That book in high school. Yeah, I've already got that downloaded. I'm probably going to jump into Russian Revolution, which was Tchaikovsky's book. I've got that one already downloaded. So I've got a lot of books. A lot of books I want to read, a lot of books we want to cover, but we kind of want to enjoy summer.
You have to enjoy life.
We kind of want to enjoy life. Yeah, right.
Off of book club.
Yeah, we probably are. So for anybody that's watching, just to understand on that, we enjoy hitting the books. We enjoy reading the books. You guys can reach out. Certainly reach out. The email is always there, 2doctorshomestead@gmail. If you want to talk about books, you certainly can, but we're definitely going to put the book club on hold, certainly through the summer. I mean, right now it's so nice outside. When we started the book club, it was wintertime.
Yeah, you start in November, December.
Right, we probably started November. It's been 6-8 months. At this point, probably it was dark out. And right now it's not. It's really nice outside.
No, sun still hasn't set yet.
This is primo. Oh, hey, Belladonna. Thank you for being here. Yeah, no, we're doing great. We just finished the book, and we're talking about putting the book club on hold for a little bit. But thank you for swinging in. We want to start enjoying the summer a little bit, but we'll come back. I'm sure we'll come back on the book club. I'm not saying we're not going to make any more YouTube surveying or anything like that, but we're just going to pause.
Just pause on book
Pause it for a little bit.
So thanks for watching.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. Thanks for watching. Oh, no problem. It's all right. Enjoy the books. Read the books. Read any books. Doesn't have to be these books. Any books are good books. So I've been reading through a lot of books. So
you like books?
I like books. Yeah. No, that's all right.
All righty. So you'll see him next time.
I'll see you guys next time. When am I going to see him next time?
When next time you do
You'll see me next time.
You'll see him. Not
You'll
me.
see me next time. We already have it. We've got about a week's worth of videos left in the queue.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate that. And we're not done making videos. We're not saying we won't make any more videos.
Yeah, he'll be making videos.
I'm still making videos. I got a couple of videos already made.
I'll still be editing his videos.
She edits the videos.
And we won't be doing a book club for a while.
Yeah, we're just going to put book club on hold for a little bit. But no, appreciate you, Belladonna. Thank you for being here. We do appreciate that. Absolutely. So we got a video already set for tomorrow. We got videos for next week.
Yeah.
And then we got to make some more. We got to make some more videos.
After the pool party.
After the pool. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you.